a non-story today where alcohol will be allowed. So there could be another former athletic director in Nebraska that someone pour him up a double shot of whiskey. They know me and Jack Daniels got a history because there's a party going on at 10th and Vine.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Good
On
job.
that note, let's welcome in from on3.com, 93.7 The Ticket, Steve Sipple. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. How are we?
Good. How are you? Are you engaged at 9:00 with a Board of Regents meeting out in Kearney that we're going to be able to drink in Memorial Stadium and elsewhere?
No, I've never considered this a big story. I don't.
Thank you.
I'm very much in the minority in the media corps. I've never thought that drinking in a stadium was a life-changing occurrence. I just thought I won't notice whether they're doing it or not. It's not a big deal.
Memorial Stadium has now become a pilgrimage because you can drink beer at Memorial Stadium.
We're in a little tiny bit. We're together. This went from what 3-4 years ago was a big story to, I think, it's kind of like a non-story. I don't think I should not be getting from the Lincoln Journal-Star and the Omaha World-Herald at 9:05 a breaking news update about this.
God, no. I mean, what are we talking about? Like, yeah, it's just not life-changing stuff. To a certain degree, I understand the acknowledgement that it's happening, but a story after story and like an evaluation of it, no, I don't care. It really doesn't make a dent in my life at all. I don't know that it makes a dent in anybody's life.
Sip, why don't you care about the fans? Jeez.
Of course I care about the fans.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't know. It's not. It just seems like something that's. It's worth acknowledging. That's about it.
Exactly. I'm glad we're on the same page. It's going to be a good interview.
Yeah. Always is. Yeah. Always is with Sip. Sip, how are you feeling about tomorrow?
Yeah, it'll be tense again. I mean, I love the way Nebraska football is now, in this sort of era, I guess, compared to when I used to cover it. It was fun covering all those championships, and the dominance was fascinating, but sometimes it wasn't fascinating because there were so many games during the year that you knew the outcome as you walked over to the stadium. You knew exactly pretty much what was going to happen, and that was about 7 or 8 times a year. You knew, and it was that had its own kind of charm. But I like this better, not knowing. I mean, I love this. That you just don't. You're not sure what's going to happen. And when I say there'll be tension, I mean that it's fun. I like that. It's fun kind of tension, and it's like that all over America. And Nebraska's right in the fray, and I think it'll be a tough game, really tough game.
Well, there's the other part of the special teams part that makes it a closer game than some would like to be involved in. So on the ESPN Power Rankings for special teams, Rutgers is 34. Your colleague Sean Callahan was the first to put it out there of Schiano's long history at Rutgers of blocking kicks, whether they be field goals, punts, extra points. This year, it's a wild stat that opposing kickers are converting at a 33% rate against Rutgers. That's just a weird stat to me. But Nebraska, in the same category, is 129th in special teams. What's your read on special teams as a whole? You can focus on long snapper if you'd like, or the kicker, but let's talk about bigger picture. Where is special teams at 5 games into the season?
Well, they're not good really in any area. I mean, it's really substandard, and it's across the board. I think what's happened is there's the long snapper, we'll call it the field goal PAT operations, kind of dominated the conversation, but there's issues all over the place. I mean, their net punting, I think it's, what are they averaging, 35 point something, and they're 100. I mean, they're in the hundreds nationally. I mean, the highest they are nationally in the key categories are 49th. I mean, come on. I mean, they're in the 90s or the hundreds in a lot of the key categories, and that's why the ESPN Power Rankings have them so low. And that's a big factor tomorrow. I mean, it is. It's part of the reason why I say, okay, so if you just get down to brass tacks here. Nebraska's got a better team.
Mhm.
There's no doubt in my mind that there's more talent on Nebraska's side. But the special teams kind of drags back the conversation for Nebraska, where it's, you're kind of concerned. Of course, you're concerned about it. Rutgers is very unique in how they punt. They have an Aussie style kicker, but the way they cover is much different. They use little, like Bill Bush was talking about this today on our show in Lincoln, and they use smaller players and they cover really well. And it's really challenging for the return man for Nebraska. And there's just a lot that it's just all in your mind. You're going, God, just don't let special teams lose this game.
Mhm.
And that's where the pressure is for Ed Foley. This is a good Nebraska team. It's a team that we've talked about is capable of winning 8 or 9 games, I think, and having the kind of year everybody wants right now. Except will special teams drag it back, and that's that. Right now, it's not far fetched to think that could happen. But every week's its own entity, and maybe you'll see significant progress this week.
Well, and Sip, one of the areas that might offset that is what this defense, in my opinion, is still all about. And from what I've heard, and I shouldn't be surprised, but what I've heard this week, and I want to know if this is where you are too, is despite having, we'll call him a very, very good running back and Kamanon guy, and what Rutgers wants to do running the football, that there is a lot of confidence, even with what happened against Illinois, that this is a great matchup for what Nebraska is about defensively. Are you on board to where if that's all Rutgers is going to do, that's game on for Nebraska?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a pretty simple equation for Nebraska's defense because Rutgers is not as good as Illinois offensively. They don't have the players on the perimeter that Rutgers has. They don't have the quarterback's not as good. So it does really. It almost just simply comes down to how do they hold up against the run. Now it's still a question, but it should, as we envision this defense going into the season, the thought was it's really going to be hard to run against them. And it has. I think they're 15th nationally, and they bowed up really well against Purdue after a couple kind of shaky performances, I thought. Northern Iowa only scored 3, but it didn't look right. Illinois got some things done that you probably didn't expect. They didn't tackle particularly well. But I thought, even though Pro Football Focus had Nebraska missing 17 tackles, I thought they swarmed really well.
Yeah. And
Maccabee rushed 13 times, I think, for 41. That's really good for Nebraska. That's a great job. Maccabee hurt Nebraska 2 years ago, 178 yards. This time they hold him down. Reggie Love gets nothing going. Good job. I mean, that's what they needed, and I think they can do that. This will be a big test, and here's a test. It's a patience test with Rutgers. They're gonna bleed clock. They're gonna try to slow it down, and if they're getting long drives, they're gonna eat up a lot of time, and and Dylan's not gonna have the ball in his hand. So the challenge to me is almost twofold. You got to shut down Monagai. Probably won't shut him down completely, but Virginia Tech held him under 100. Maybe you can do that. But don't allow sustained drives because Nebraska's going to be able to move the ball, but they have to have the ball.
Yep.
And that's what Shiano does. He just tries to choke out the clock. It's very boring football. I'm amazed that Tennessee would even have looked at him. The way he plays, he couldn't. I don't think he could possibly go to Tennessee and play like this. So you just got to hope Nebraska gets off the field. Get off the field and get the ball to your offense because your offense, it's a good offense Nebraska has.
And in the Illinois game, that offense staying on the field, which I thought was a key point in that game, and I think tomorrow is another part of staying on the field. And that usually goes to can you run the ball and can you choose some clock? What's your temperature check on where the run game is right now? Closer to kind of what we saw in the first half or a lot more of what we saw in the second half last Saturday?
Well, I hope that it's to me it's I don't know. I thought it would be better. Nebraska's 86th nationally in rushing. I don't think that's where anybody thought they'd be, and that's what it looks like to me. They didn't. I mean, it looks like about a team that would be in the 80s. Got to get better, and it won't be easy. I mean, Rutgers. I think got to make very clear that this defense that Rutgers has this year is not nearly as good as it was in 2022 when Nebraska played them. They're not as aggressive up front, which, you might think that maybe they're not as good on the back end. Maybe they don't trust that secondary as much. It's not as a physical defense. So you might be able to line up and run it at them. Although, I mean, I'm not as big on that conversation as I was in August because of Dylan. What I like about this offense is the weapons on the perimeter and Fedoni, and I guess you'd say Carter Nelson. But they can move the ball. They'll be able to move the ball against a lot of teams through the air. And Dylan makes really good decisions. There's just all those guys you got to use them: Nayor, Banks, Ja'Cory Barney, Carter Nelson, Fedoni. Get the ball. I mean, you got guys we don't even mention that are good. So. I guess I'm not as worried about it as I was, but on the other hand, if you're really think about being a championship team, you usually have to be able to run it in key moments, and we'll see if that happens.
Okay, and kind of with what you just said there, Sip, is it vital in these next two games, Rutgers and Indiana, that Nebraska find a red zone identity, or is there enough what they can do in the big play, especially with that schedule that comes up in October, November, that they can do with the big play that you can be patient with them finding that identity? Because it looks like right now it's a major work in progress from that standpoint.
In the red zone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it just feels like they're just throwing darts.
Agreed.
Open it. I mean, but I don't know. See, I'm not smart enough to, like, if you said to me, Nick, Sipple, what should be the red zone identity? I'm just not smart enough to identify it. I don't know what you do. If you can't run the ball in the red, if you're not just blowing people off the line of scrimmage, then it gets really hard to red zone. Field shortens up, and your playbook gets very limited. So this isn't criticizing Marcus Satterfield. You're just in kind of a fix if you're not able to run the ball consistently. Then it really shows up in the red zone, right?
Yeah.
You just it gets very difficult. I've seen it a zillion times. Like, and the thought I always have is, what do you call? What are you calling here? So I don't have it. There's no easy answers. It all goes back to Dylan. I trust Dylan at a high level to be able to make plays that a lot of guys can't make. He can do it. A lot of these conversations for me just wind back to number 15 and how, not only how talented he is, but he's smart and he can kind of figure things out. And he's just going to keep getting better that way.
Steve Sipple from Husker Online and 93.7 The Ticket joining us. Stick with Dylan. So I know what you talked about the offseason and what you talked about since the season began about DR15. Is he better than you expected? And you had fairly high hopes for him.
Yeah, a little. I really thought he was going to be good. And I was saying in August to anybody who would listen, the last thing I'm worried about is Dylan. He'll always be ready, prepared mentally. There's a few things I wondered about. I wondered if he kind of recognized the urgency that you need to play with at this level. He does. There's been a couple instances, like against Illinois, he was a little casual with the ball. And if I were, this is when it gets really bad when I do this, but if I were, a quarterback's coach, if I was Glenn Thomas, I'd be drilling into his head all the time. You're in an urgent situation. Don't be too casual. Because Dylan's so talented that I think he can look a little casual sometimes, just because he's so talented. But no, this is about what probably a little better actually.
Mm-hmm.
a little better in just the way he handles himself. He's so mature. He did not get nervous on the road. You wonder, okay, first road game, what's that going to look like? No pulse. He was fine.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even think about it. Like it's a fascinating conversation to me, Dylan, because you've almost through 5 games now. Now you kind of take him for granted, and we're 5 games in. I mean, you just know he's going to take care of the ball. You know he's going to make good decisions. You know he's going to bail you out a third and long. He's just a special. He's a special player from a mental standpoint, an emotional standpoint. It goes without saying he's got a great right arm.
He does. All right, Sip. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. We got big plans before kickoff at 3 tomorrow.
God, no.
Okay.
Probably got to work a little bit today, and then everything starts pretty early tomorrow. Yeah. So no, routine stuff, guys.
All right, looking good with that new haircut.
God, those guys shamed me into it.
No, it looks good. I mean,
it looks like Holgerson.
Well,
that's a good comparison. Yeah,
I always get the Holgerson comparison. Always get the
yeah, it's not that bad.
Thanks, Gary. Not that bad.
You'll take that, right?
Yeah, baby steps.
Hey, like
that. Thanks. We'll see you tomorrow.
God bless you.
That's Steve Sipple.